Can I very much welcome you this morning of what is our final meeting before the Christmas recess. Could I advise members of the need to maintain social distancing during the meeting and provide a brief overview of the day's business. Today the committee will consider subordinate legislation, a briefing from the Electricity Supply Board, ESB Ecars and the EV Charging Network, and a briefing from Sustrans tackling climate change through active travel. Can I advise members that due to witnesses and some members joining the meeting remotely that it would be helpful if members use the hand up icon to register if they wish to speak or ask questions at each agenda item. Also, if members could mute their microphones when they're not speaking, and that would allow the evidence to hear, or members to hear the evidence and follow the meeting accordingly. Could I also advise members of the need to vacate the room by 12 noon at the latest, and request that members keep that in mind when asking questions. Okay, first agenda item, which is apologies. I have one apology, which is from Cara Hunter. Do you have any other apologies? Yeah, Cahill?
Chair Leslie will join us a wee bit late, but she's coming in, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, that's all I have. So if we go to agenda item number 2, which is chairperson's business. I have none. We have covered the issue in relation to the committee engagement event. That will be redrafted. Agenda item number 3, which is draft minutes. And could I turn members' attentions to page 6, draft minutes of the meeting on the 8th of December 2021. Are members content that the minutes are a true and accurate reflection of the meeting? Members agreed? Agreed? Okay. Agenda item number 4, which is matters arising from the minute. So page 15, matters arising from the meeting of the 8th of December 2021. Can I ask members if they have any issues arising from the meeting? Don't see any indications. And at page 19, which is outstanding committee requests for information. Are members content with the meeting and nothing to add? I think we already have done this, but just our thanks to Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon for having us down in Armagh. I do hope that one of the participants in the audience is certainly feeling a lot better from the meeting. Indicated that he is. But it was a useful meeting, members, and I thought it was a useful template for outreach for a committee such as this, where you can go to a council area, you can hear a broad overview of the infrastructure issues within that area, plus a specific issue pertaining to that locality. So I found that particularly interesting, and given the situation in the new year, I know we have limited time, but I am open to suggestions from members if they feel that there's a particular council area that could encompass something different, whether that's first of all lead on infrastructure issues or another design type project. So my thanks to them, and I also like to put on record my thanks to the Armagh Observatory. I think those that did stay behind found that a very, very useful meeting, and the technology advancements there and their ability actually to have an impact on DFI actually is something that I found very, very interesting. So that's just my points. I'll go to Cahill Boylan for a question.
Sure, thank you, Chair, and I'll certainly will welcome the opportunity to go to Armagh. I would say to people thanks to the Observatory and the Planetarium as well for facilitating this, and also hold on, Chair. Sorry, Chair, a wee bit of background noise. No, Chair, just the Planetarium and the Observatory who facilitated the visit. I would encourage other members, if we're going out to other places, and I hope we get an opportunity in the new year to do that. There's a lot of good facilities, I'm sure, out around those areas, and it'd be good to take the opportunity to visit those, albeit I know it has to be DFA orientated, but there's some good facilities out there that can, and just getting public funding. So once again, thanks for coming down to Armagh, and thanks for all those people who facilitated. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. No other indications. Okay, we'll now move on to agenda item number 5, which is correspondence. And could I draw members' attention to the correspondence memo at page 35 and tabled papers? So I could bring members' attention to that, and we'll go down through them. 5.2, a suggestion members to note, and if members have a particular issue to come in on. 5.3, which is to discuss, which is extension of goods vehicles operator licences to light goods vehicles used for hire and reward in EU member states. Have members any comments to make on that? I see Cahill Boylan's hand raised.
Yeah, sure. Just the have I had RHA or FTA's comments in relation to this matter, or any responses in relation to that?
I'll defer to the clerk to see if there is any response on that. I don't believe there is. No, I don't believe so, but we can inquire. I'll go to Roy Beggs.
Yeah.
My recollection is that legislation is still being developed in this area and is to be brought forward in the new year, but it's still a very short time away from implementation. It strikes me it is much better if legislation is brought forward well in advance, with clear warning being given, and time to engage with all those companies or individuals who will be affected. There may well be some sole traders who may not be hooked into legislative changes and how this may affect them. And if it is brought in very quickly, I can see the potential of difficulties arising with some people may not being able to meet it. So I just encourage that legislation should be brought forward and finalised as soon as possible, and then that DVA would contact all those that it may apply to.
Okay. So I think maybe as an action point from that, we could write to the department expressing our concerns about engagement and timescales with that, if members were content on that point. I'm not seeing anybody to the contrary that we are having connection issues. It seems online, but however, members are content then to go on through this correspondence memo. I don't see any other hands. I know where there is a lag on the online, certainly. 5.4, which is sorry, I'm hearing.
Yeah, Chair. Can I come on just a moment? It's later on, but go on ahead. And
Okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll make my way down through the correspondence note here, and if members have a point you want to come in on one of these issues, bring it up there and then. And if it's a different issue, wait to the end, please. So 5.4 is to note. 5.5 is to note. 5.6 is to note, 5.7 to note, 5.8 to discuss. So the Minister of Finance response to the committee request regarding the financial impacts of January 2022 monitoring round in Northern Ireland Water and TransLink. As I see Andrew's hand raised on that point. Andrew, if you want to come in.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm very disappointed to receive a letter from the Finance Minister and the contents that are contained within it, particularly in relation to the statement at the end in terms of financial support for TransLink. It does seem a bit puzzling to me that only just a few weeks after COP26 that the Finance Minister is washing his hands of responsibility ensuring that we have a fit-for-purpose public transport network which allows sustainable travel, especially with his statement stating that I'm aware of the continuing impact of reduced passenger numbers on TransLink revenues. TransLink has received unprecedented financial support from the Executive over the past 2 years and is simply not sustainable for this to continue indefinitely. Steps must be taken by the Department for Infrastructure and TransLink to put its finances on a more sustainable footing. The reality is that passenger numbers are continuing to be depressed as a result of the pandemic, and statements like that are not helpful. So I was going to propose that we pass on the letter that's been received to TransLink for comment, and also to the department in terms of how they're intending to respond in terms of that stance that's being taken from the Finance Minister.
Okay, have we any other comments from members in relation to that particular point? Cathal Boylan?
Sorry, Chair, I missed that point there. Could you repeat that, sorry?
Andrew, do you want to repeat what you had suggested? Do you want me to summarise?
Okay, so the Finance Minister sent a letter to the Infrastructure Committee, but at the end of it he's stating that the steps must be taken by the Department for Infrastructure and TransLink to put its finances on a more sustainable footing. The reality is, Cathal, that passenger numbers are continuing to be depressed, and we need to be able to support our public transport system, and that requires funding. And we all know the financial situation for the Department of Infrastructure at the present moment in time, reflected in the funding crisis for Northern Ireland Water. So the suggestion is that we pass on the letter to TransLink for comment, and also to the Department of Infrastructure in terms of how they intend to respond to this stance from the Finance Minister.
Yeah, no, I'm happy enough with that, Chair. I mean, I would imagine, Chair, maybe our first meeting back to try to maybe get TransLink up to have a conversation in committee. I don't know.
Yeah, I think in part the Finance Minister is probably highlighting an ongoing issue with TransLink in terms of financial, in terms of the money that's been allocated and how and ways of working. So it would probably be useful for us to hear from TransLink. I would agree with that approach. before we take further action, to hear the concerns, but also to obviously January is going to change things as well in relation to the monitoring round. So I think we will try to schedule in a briefing as soon as possible from TransLink, which would be useful.
I'd be happy with that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, members. We're going on down through this. So where are we here now? Yes, 5.10 members to note, 5.11 members to note, 5.12 members to note, 5.13 members to note, 5.14 members to note, 5.15 members to note, and 5.16 members to note. I'll go to Patrick Delargy. You had indicated that you wanted to raise a point.
Yeah, Chair, it was just in relation to the follow-up meeting from the 24th of November, so it was around the reinstatement of roadworks from the utility companies. Obviously, this is an issue that I've previously raised, and I'm noticing there that there's 1,800 instances where roads haven't been properly repaired in the last 2 years. I mean, it's an enormous number. This has been an issue, obviously, in many constituencies and in my own as well. So I think it's worth the committee having a briefing from the department on this to see what can be done about it. Chair, while I'm on, I just want to raise a separate point, and easier to raise the two at the one time, around Under the West. Just noticed there as well, obviously there's been correspondence from Under the West, and I just want to express my support for this request. To brief the committee, I think it's largely recognised that the Northwest needs, I suppose, improved rail, and I think the committee would really benefit from this engagement, so it's something that I would fully support.
Okay, thank you. In relation to your first point, which was on roads reinstatement, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I certainly would agree with Patrick that it certainly is an unacceptable standard. I have this day and daily actually about the engagement with utility companies and contractors and the state that they leave roads in after. I don't think it's adequate. I don't think it's responsible either. And certainly I think that it would warrant a further briefing from the committee if members were agreed to Patrick's point. Agreed? I'm not seeing any dissenting voices, so we will schedule that in as well. Okay, members, points have all been raised, so I've got no further points to raise in correspondence. So are members content with the actions as suggested in the correspondence memo? Agreed? Agreed. Okay. Agenda item number 6, which is subordinate legislation. SL1's not subject to assembly procedure. Can I advise members that there are 3 proposals for statutory rules not subject to assembly proceedings at page 616. SL1, the Parking Places Disabled Persons Vehicle Amendment number 9, Order Northern Ireland 2021. SL1, the Parking Places on Road and Waiting Restrictions Mackerfelt Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2021. And SL1, the Parking and Waiting Restrictions Newton Abbey Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2022. Are members content with the proposals for the statutory rules? Content? Content. Okay, agenda item number 7, which is SL1, the Crankhill Road Central Reservation Ballymena Stopping Up Order Northern Ireland 2022. At page 628 of your pack, the SL1, the proposal is subject to negative resolution procedure. The rule will stop a gap in Central Reservation at Crankhill Road, Ballymena, at a point south of its junction with Finnick Road for a distance of 5.7 metres in a southerly direction. The department has consulted on the proposal, and the proposals have been amended to satisfy objections. I am not aware of the objections that were raised, but if this has satisfied them, are members content with the Roy Biggs?
I am content, but I just would wish to make the point that from the map that was provided to us, really there's very, very little information to satisfy us that it's a good road safety decision, but from having did some contact locally, I understand others are content, so I am content with the rule, but would prefer a more detailed map of how, of the actual junction rather than just the spot on the map where it's occurring, which is what we have been provided with.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. You can't really take much from the map as it stands, so No, happy for that point to go back to the department on, but in general with the content, are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule? Content?
Content.
Thank you, members. Agenda item number 8. Subordinate legislation SRs not subject to assembly proceedings. Can I advise members that there are 3 statutory rules not subject to assembly proceedings? There have been no changes to policy content since the SL1s were considered by the committee on the 17th and 24th of November, and members were content to note. At page 633, SR 2021-324, the Parking and Waiting Restrictions Lisburn Order, Northern Ireland 2021. At page 645, SR 2021-327, the Traffic Weight Restriction Amendment Order, Northern Ireland 2021. And at page 648, the SR 2021-333, the Parking and Waiting Restrictions Rathryland Amendment Order, Northern Ireland 2021. Our members could I advise members to note that the statutory rules on this, if any points to raise on these proposals. Are members content with the statutory rules?
Content.
Content, thank you, members. Agenda item number 9, which is draft SR, the Grants to Water and Sewage Undertakers Order, Northern Ireland 2022. At page 652 of your packs is the statutory rule. The statutory rule will extend the period during which the department will pay a subsidy to NI Water as the water and sewage undertaker in lieu of domestic water charges for a further 5 years to the 31st of March 2027. The rule is by affirmative resolution. The committee received a briefing from officials on the legislation at its meeting on the 24th of November 2021 and was content with the statutory rule. Members will note we did have questions surrounding that particular rule, and in light particularly of the length of time that was being extended by, and that was explained that it was to give flexibility for a new mandate and take that into consideration. Are members content with this statutory rule?
Content. Content, Chair.
Okay, members, I now read into the meeting that the Committee for Infrastructure has considered the draft SR, the Grants to Water and Sewage Undertakers Order, Northern Ireland 2022, and subject to the examiner of statutory rules, the report has no objection to the rule. Members happy enough with that? Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, agenda item number 10, which is SR 2021-337, the Regulation EC number 1370/2007, Public Service Obligations and Transport Amendment, EU Exit Northern Ireland Regulations 2021. At page 225 of your packs is the statutory rule. The committee considered the proposal for the rule on the 1st of December 2021 and the majority was content. 2 members reserved their position. The rule is subject to negative resolution. There has been no change to the policy content of the SR since the SL1 was considered by the committee. Are members content with this rule? Roy Beggs has indicated he wishes to speak.
Much of the rule is fine, just reflecting how things are, but I still continue to question why public sector contracts should be regulated by a EU directive, and in particular that we should be legislating to allow the EU to adjust whether or not Translink carries parcels and the conditions around that. I just don't understand that overreach that is being continued to be in place from the EU.
Okay, so you
I
have to reserve,
reserve my position, yeah.
and I also will reserve my position on that. Okay, members, I'm seeing no other indications, so are members content with this rule?
Content.
So if so, members will read the following motion. That the Committee for Infrastructure has considered SR 2021-337, the Regulation EC number 1370/2007, Public Services Obligations and Transport Amendment, EU Exit Northern Ireland, Regulations 2021, and subject to the examiner of statutory rules, has no objection to the rule. Okay, members. Agenda item number 11, which is a briefing by the Electricity Board, ESB, on Ecars and the EV charging network. At page 670 of your pack, the ESB briefing paper. And can I welcome attending via Starleaf, Mr. John Walsh, Great Britain Manager, Customer Solutions, Electricity Supply Board, and Mr. John Byrne, ESB, Ecars Manager, Electricity Supply Board. Gentlemen, you're both very welcome to committee this morning, and could I now hand over to you for your presentation to the committee, followed by questions.
Good morning, Chair. My name is John Walsh, and this is my colleague John Byrne. We're delighted to be asked to present to the committee this morning. ESB has been investing in Ecar infrastructure for over 10 years now, and I'll ask John maybe just to give a presentation now on our plans for Northern Ireland.
Thanks, John. And thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the committee, for the opportunity to present here today. Just a little about ESB. ESB is a leading all-island utility. We primarily operate across Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, and indeed in Great Britain, but we have operations right throughout the globe. We are very committed to investing in critical infrastructure in consultation and collaboration with the communities that we serve, and indeed for their benefit. As John pointed out, we're a very significant investor in Northern Ireland. Since our entry into the market in the early 2000s, we initially commenced with the construction of wind farms in 1998 and currently have 6 in our portfolio. In 2005, then we developed Coolkira. Coolkira is a 400 megawatt gas-fired thermal plant, one of the biggest in Northern Ireland, if not the biggest in Northern Ireland. It remains the most efficient thermal power plant in Northern Ireland and is absolutely critical and crucial for the security of supply and in supporting the growing levels of renewables on the power system. In 2010, we acquired Northern Ireland Networks in what was quite a significant development. Northern Ireland Networks, as you know, is a key player in the energy industry in Northern Ireland with 1,200 employees. I would point out that the NIE Networks is an independent business within ESB. It's ring-fenced from our other businesses and has its own board of directors, management, and is regulated by the Utility Regulator of Northern Ireland. Since the acquisition in 2010, NIE Networks has invested 1.2 billion in critical and much-needed grid infrastructure in Northern Ireland to support the economy in the first instance, but also the decarbonisation efforts in Northern Ireland. We also have a presence in the retail electricity market since the early 2000s, initially as ESB Independent Energy, where we supplied some business customers, but more recently Electric Ireland Northern Ireland, or Electric Ireland NI, entered the market and now supply retail solutions to in the region of 100,000 residential and business customers. We also invest heavily in the community under the NI brand through sponsorships and charitable causes. We're a sponsorship partner of women's football and the Darkness into Light walk. Just to give you a little bit more information about ESB Ecars in Northern Ireland. So ESB Ecars operates the EV charging network in Northern Ireland. It briefly consists of 160 public fast EV chargers and 17 rapid EV chargers. In addition to that, we were responsible and a critical part of the rollout of the initial charging infrastructure. That was a consortium approach back at the turn of the decade. The Department of Infrastructure was involved, the Utility Regulator was involved, the Donnelly Motor Group, ourselves, Northern Ireland Networks, to name but a few at that time. This charging infrastructure is now set to be comprehensively rejuvenated and revitalised with the assistance of the levelling up funding, which I'll come to in a couple of minutes. But the development of an EV charging system doesn't stop with the chargers, and we've developed state-of-the-art back-office procedures and supports. And one of the supports we are most proud of, I guess, is the provision of a 24/7, 365 contact centre, which offers much-needed support for drivers wherever they are at chargers or at home, wherever they need some advice. We have also provided digital usage platforms such as the website which we have and our app. About 70% of our customers are regular users of our app. It allows customers, it allows members of the public, anyone who's downloaded the app, to identify their nearest charging points, clarify and identify whether it's in use or whether it's free at the time. And when they're at that charging station, they are able to start and stop a charge at that using the app as well. And obviously, of course, then we're responsible for the ongoing maintenance and the repair of the network. The network is essential to, we feel it's essential, and international experience would deem it as essential that we have a best-in-class charging infrastructure to facilitate EV uptake in Northern Ireland. The current levels of EVs in Northern Ireland hovers around 4,700. The network is currently offered free to use for all EV drivers. And we're committed, as I said before, to enabling the electrification of transport in Ireland. We view this as a key component of our Brighter Future strategy. I will say, however, that the existing charging infrastructure is now close to a decade old, and it has associated low levels of uptime, which are typically slightly less than 70%. While we are continuing to try and maintain this infrastructure to the highest possible levels, it's become very difficult to do so. A lot of the early manufacturers of the charging equipment have shut, and some of the existing suppliers no longer support that original equipment. So the availability of knowledge, and more so the availability of spare parts, makes life very difficult, shall I say, in terms of maintaining the assets on a regular basis. Recognising this, in late summer of 2021, ESB put in place an analytics programme to identify the 30 worst performing chargers in Northern Ireland and put an investment into Northern Ireland to replace all of those chargers. That programme commenced in around July or August of this year and finished in mid-November. Excuse me, on schedule. Excuse me, I beg your pardon. Just a note to say we also have a comprehensive charging infrastructure in the Republic of Ireland, and indeed extensive operations in Great Britain. We own and operate a substantial networks in the cities of London, Coventry and Birmingham. Birmingham perhaps will be the most populated city with our chargers. We're right in the middle of a programme to install 200 chargers in the city boundaries. There are, however, a number of commercial challenges to the rollout of charging infrastructure. The numbers of EVs the starting number is very low, 4,700, although we do acknowledge the efforts of many to increase that number, and we acknowledge that the number is rising rapidly. There are, however, about half of those vehicles are plug-in hybrids, which all of our experience in all of the jurisdictions, and indeed in Northern Ireland, points to the fact that those hybrids aren't as frequent users of the charging network as full battery EVs. To ensure that EV adoption is available to all customers, regardless of whether you have a home charging or not, it is imperative that a comprehensive public network is put in place, and we see this as one of our primary roles. Despite the expected increase in the number of EVs in the coming years, it remains highly unlikely that the numbers of EVs will present themselves in Northern Ireland to be sufficient to justify a significant commercial investment in Northern Ireland. International research also highlights to us, both in this jurisdiction and in others, that the financial sort of risks and the financial returns for charge point operators like ourselves to invest in charging infrastructure ahead of demand is very, very challenging. I'll just come to the second part of my presentation, really, which is around the Levelling Up Fund. So we applied for Levelling Up funding to completely rebuild and rejuvenate the entire public EV charging network in Northern Ireland. We made the application in June, mid-summer of this year, and we received very valued support from numerous MLAs, and also local authorities lent letters of support or wrote us letters of support, and we got many lobby and environmental group support to assist. I think all told we had 14 letters of support to include in our application, and we're sure that was a key factor in the success of the bid. The good news is that we received confirmation that our application for funding had been successful last month in mid-November. That followed a multi-stage iterative process. The funding that has been secured will now allow us to significantly modernise and strengthen the current network. It will upgrade and enhance every single charging point. and in addition, in strategically important areas or on strategically important routes, it will allow us for the first time add next generation charging hubs to the network, and these charging hubs will cater for all vehicles. There are 4 main kind of pillars to the project, which I'll briefly touch on. So the first pillar, which numerically speaking, I guess is the greatest, that is the upgrading of the entire fast and rapid charging network. So every single charger that exists in our network will be upgraded with modern, reliable units. 7 of the rapid chargers will be upgraded, but we have included that there will be a fast charger replaced with a fast charger. So in essence, it's a like-for-like replacement. The 2 final pillars are in 20 of the locations, so in about 25% of the population generally, the existing fast chargers will be replaced with rapid chargers. And these new chargers will increase the charging speeds at those locations by a factor of 12. And then the final piece is the introduction of high-powered charging hubs. Now, these are state-of-the-art charging hubs. These will contain chargers which will operate at 150 or 200 kilowatts. So speeds far in excess of what exists at the moment on the network. There will be 5 of these multi-vehicle HPC hubs. They will be capable of charging between 4 and 8 vehicles simultaneously. And the real advantage for EV drivers is that they will provide a modern car, I guess, or a driver with 100 kilometres of range in about 6 to 7 minutes. We view the project as the single most important project for EV drivers in a generation, in a decade certainly. It will deliver huge and substantial benefits to both the current and to future EV drivers, those considering buying EVs. The benefits will include a greatly expanded network with the installation of these additional charging locations, significantly improved reliability, which has been a factor and is a factor in the Northern Ireland network currently, substantially faster charging times for EV drivers by a factor of 10 to 20 in some instances, and consequently, which is what we're all after, I guess, a corresponding reduction in carbon and transport carbon emissions in Northern Ireland. In terms of timelines, the project will begin in Q1 next year. However, we've already commenced some of the earlier project activities with local councils, private landowners to secure consent around installing and keeping charging infrastructure on their site. I would like to point out that there is a worldwide shortage of chargers. That's due to a number of factors, the lack of availability of microprocessing chips, the surge in demand for EV chargers generally, and then some other issues around supply chain issues globally with COVID, etc. The last little piece I would say is in terms of keeping the public up to speed on what it is we do on a day-to-day basis. We have a very sizable and engaged social media presence. Currently, for any of the programmes that we are involved in, whether they be in Birmingham, London, Republic of Ireland, and indeed over the summer when we invested in the 30 new chargers, we post content which includes photos and locations of all the upgrades that we do to both our app and our social media channel, so that all of our users are informed in near real time of the additions and enhancement to our networks. We publish daily updates so that people are aware of this and can, once they're aware, they can plan or change their charging habits appropriately. I'll finish by saying that ESB is absolutely and wholly committed to the electrification of transport in Northern Ireland and indeed all of the jurisdictions that we operate in. We will continue to work with our stakeholders, with the motoring community and with EV drivers to ensure that both the charging infrastructure but also the charging experience for EV drivers in Northern Ireland is significantly improved over the coming years. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, John. We'll now go for some questions. I suppose what I would first of all say is that there has been a lot of excitement and conversation surrounding the electrification of transport and its part in the decarbonisation journey. But there has been a lot of negative criticism as to the state of the electric car infrastructure electricity supply network in Northern Ireland. So I just wanted to clarify a few points. At present, there's 177 charge points in Northern Ireland, isn't that correct? 160 fast public charge points and 17 rapid charge points.
That's on our network, but
Yeah.
there are some other there are some other charge point operators with some of their own chargers, albeit the numbers of their chargers are quite substantially smaller than our own.
Okay. As of today, how many of your 177 charge points are working?
Yeah, so if I can take this opportunity, Chairman, just to talk about reliability generally, just for a moment. As of today, between 135 and 145, depending on the day, would be working out of the total population. However, when we look at that corresponds to about 69-70% reliability rate on a month-on-month basis in Northern Ireland. However, in advance of appearing before the committee today, we did take a look at the 30 chargers that we have upgraded. That programme, as I outlined, finished in mid-November, and we have tracked the reliability metrics since mid-November. I am delighted to tell you that for those 30 chargers that we replaced over the summer and into the early autumn, the reliability rates there that we have seen on those chargers has been 96% and above since that programme has been finished. So it does go to show the difference in the rejuvenation of the existing charging infrastructure and the impact it'll have on reliability.
Yeah, I understand newer charging points will have a greater reliability, but at present you talk of 130 to 135 charge points working, so around 69% reliability. Do you think that is a public endorsement for regards to reliability and the desire to change to an electric vehicle if that was the percentage of reliability?
So we recognise that there is a lot of work to do, and hence why we're so delighted to receive the levelling up funding. I guess by comparison, we did see in some other jurisdictions with networks of that age how difficult it is to retain very, very high reliability rates. I did touch off how difficult it was by virtue of the fact that there are no spare parts available, the fact that the working chargers do see quite extensive use, and the fact that the passage of time, the number of software and hardware updates over time, all of these factors have contributed to poorer levels of reliability. I can also say that we spend in the region of 500 to 600 pounds per annum maintaining that network. So it operates at the highest possible level technically that it is capable to do so. The only route for higher reliability rates at this point is for a substantial change out of the old infrastructure that exists.
At its worst point, what was the total number of charging points that weren't working in Northern Ireland at its worst point?
I don't have that information to hand, Chairman, but I can get it and come back to the committee if you require it.
I think it would be good to hear, because and the evidence that this committee took in relation to its decarbonisation of road transport inquiry, there was a huge emphasis by many people within this, that responded that the biggest barrier to them engaging and taking up an electric vehicle was the charging point. They talked about the PERS service that was in place to begin with. And I suppose what I'm trying to get to the nub of is that at its worst, what was the infrastructure, what was the worst it looked like, what was the number of charging points that were out of place compared to those that were operational. There's a whole host of issues here that I think we really need to drill down into. What targets are in place for response times for fixing broken vehicle charging points, and what are the actual response times? Do you have any of that information, John?
I do indeed. Just to confirm, I'll come back to you, Chairman, with the figure that you've requested. I can tell you in terms of SLAs, we outsource the maintenance of our chargers to a third party. We are currently in the process, and we'll have we're in a procurement process as we speak. But for 2022, we will have a new provider on the ground. Depending on the severity, I guess, of the incident that we find at the chargers, there's different service level agreements under the new procurement. The best is 2 hours, I guess. So there's a 2-hour turnaround for some of the more, if for example, a charger had been knocked over by a bin lorry and there was exposed electricity or whatever on the ground, that would be a very critical incident for us. We have a 2-hour SLA in the procurement documents for them. That ranges down to a 2-day turnaround time for items such as graffiti that don't directly impact or affect the operation of the network.
Maybe just, Chairman, just to maybe add to John's point on this, we have been working in Northern Ireland for 10 years providing EV public infrastructure, and I think it's fair to say that we've all been quite uncomfortable with the state of the network in Northern Ireland over the last 2 to 3 years, which is why we've been so keen to work with the car owners, with representatives across the industry to put in place a solution to try and upgrade the infrastructure to a standard where e-car drivers and the general public will have confidence that there is a solid, reliable system that they can depend on.
Okay.
We've gone through a similar process in the Republic of Ireland, and we've increased the reliability of the system there, following a similar upgrading program to well over 95%. And the feedback we get from EV owners and the EV Owners Association is generally excellent, and we do work with them to ensure that they have confidence in the system. We also provide a similar service in London, and we have a long-term partnership with the black taxi drivers in London, and providing reliable EV infrastructure for the black taxi fleet in London is also a key part of our business as they electrify their fleet. And again, by ensuring that we have current, highly reliable EV infrastructure, they can confidently move their livelihoods from using diesel to electricity, which they've been doing over the last 3 to 4 years, again with confidence. And they have given us a lot of very positive, strong feedback. Again, the reliability of the systems in London is well over 95%. And we envisage, following the upgrade of the system in Northern Ireland, that we would be operating at very similar high levels of availability and reliability, which is why we're so delighted to get this levelling up fund, because it helps us unlock the potential of the network in Northern Ireland.
Okay, and I'm glad you've recognised that ESB have been uncomfortable with the service provision from, I think are we still got online, yes?
Yeah.
No, listen, I'm glad that you've recognised that ESB are uncomfortable with the service provision, because from a service user and indeed a public representative's perspective, the service has been abysmal. And I think we really need to ramp it up, and I think there needs to be recognition first and foremost of that, and I think I'm hearing that today. And we need to find solutions, because the biggest barrier to that electric vehicle uptake is indeed the infrastructure that's in place. You mentioned you were moving towards a new provider within the SLA. Could I ask how long had that provider been with you here for Northern Ireland, and what were the primary reasons for changing?
Yes, Chair, they've been with us for several years. They were employed as many of our providers are under framework contracts, and the framework contract period had naturally come to an end, and hence under procurement law we went out to the market to procure a provider for the next period.
Okay. And do you have a total number of electric charging point infrastructure that there is in the Republic of Ireland, both fast and rapid charging points, just offhand?
Yeah, it's 1,350 on the island.
1,350. And how many is that for in the Republic of Ireland? Minus 177, is that what we're saying?
Yeah, 180 approximately,
yeah.
Just shy of 1,200.
And do we have, in terms of reliability, 69% you're saying here in Northern Ireland, do we have a reliability percentage in the Republic of Ireland?
Yeah, the reliability percentage is about 98% over the past 12 months. Yeah, about 12 months. Yeah. Since the investment, the Irish government ran a programme called the Climate Action Fund that ESB are continuing to partake in. That involved the replacement of a lot of the fast and rapid chargers. So there are quite a lot of similarities between that and the Levelling Up Fund. Those works were undertaken over a 18-month to 24-month period. Before that investment, we saw similar reliability rates in the Republic of Ireland to those we currently see in Northern Ireland. And hence, that's why we are very confident that once this investment and once this infrastructure is replaced and installed right across the Northern Ireland jurisdiction, at that point we will have reliability rates in the very high 90s.
Okay, so just for clarity, at present, reliability in the Republic of Ireland for the ESB infrastructure system, 98%, and at present, 69% in Northern Ireland. Are those figures correct? Yes?
It's 70%, you're correct.
You know, it can only lead me to believe that Northern Ireland's the poor child in this relationship. You know, and I'm saying that frankly, I think it's disgraceful. I think there needs to be a renewed focus here on what we can deliver for Northern Ireland if we are serious about meeting decarbonisation targets and if we're serious about building a transport system that is fit for electric vehicles. I'm not going to detain you gentlemen any longer personally. I'm going to go up into the committee, but I just find that startling that is the difference of service level provision. And I think there's considerable work that needs to happen.
Maybe just to respond to that, I think we've been working with the government in the Republic of Ireland on increasing the reliability and availability of the network. We've rolled out an upgrade program over the last 3 years to take it from a similar relatively low level of availability to where it is today, which is at 98%. We're just about to embark on a similar upgrade program in Northern Ireland. We're really excited about this. You know, we see the Levelling Up Fund as the key to unlocking the upgrade program. We're going to roll that out over the next 18 months. And by the time that upgrade program is finished, we would expect the Northern Ireland network to have probably better availability at that stage, because we are moving to next generation charging technology and faster charging than we have in the Republic of Ireland. So I think it's, you know, absolutely, you know, looking back, you know, the network isn't where we would be comfortable it being. It's not a great level of service. That said, we have a commitment now to upgrade the network, and in the very near future, we'll be providing a similar or better level of service in Northern Ireland than we have in the Republic.
Okay, and I appreciate that. So I think you're saying that, so in the Republic of Ireland, in terms of ASB, there's 1,180 charging points, 170 in Northern Ireland. So that would suggest a like-for-like basis with Northern Ireland. We would need around 350 to 450, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, to have a similar infrastructure in place as to the Republic of Ireland. Are you confident ASB can deliver that in a timely manner?
So I think maybe just to reflect on the car numbers, because that's an important consideration as well. Currently in the Republic of Ireland, we have about 50,000 electric cars, and in Northern Ireland, we have about 4,600, and growing. So I think it's also important to just reflect the relative size of the electric fleet. Now, we do need to build for the future, but we also need to have a charging infrastructure that's available for, you know, the current EV owners that have electric cars today.
I'll just finish with saying, build it and they will come. Okay. I'll go now to the next speaker, which is Cathal Boylan.
Thank you, Chair and gentlemen. You're very welcome, and thank you for your presentation. Chair, I would agree with you. Build it and they will come. Just want to talk a wee bit about funding, if I may, just at the start, gentlemen. Obviously, we're looking for a range of options such as funding through DFI, but you end up, John, you touched there on the Levelling Up Fund, and that was good to see. But what have been your engagement with DFI in terms of funding, and how does this compare with down south for the funding available through the Climate Action Fund? Clearly, there's more available there. Would you like to just comment on that, and the difference between funding availability north and south, please?
Yeah, in both sorry, thanks for the questions, first of all, and thanks for your welcome. In both jurisdictions on the island of Ireland, and indeed in Great Britain, we lobby across the board for funding. for EV charging infrastructure. In none of the jurisdictions that we operate in has it been possible or have we seen purely private enterprise roll out charging infrastructure. In all of the cases we're involved in London, for example, it's a lot of the installation of charging infrastructure is funded by TfL or Transport for London. In Coventry City, and again in Birmingham, it's a collaboration with Birmingham City Council. In the Republic of Ireland, yes, we came through a competitive process and availed of the climate action funding that was made available. We are probably in the last third in terms of the time period for the climate action funding. It runs out in September 2023, so we have about 20 months left to run. In terms of the engagement with the Department of Infrastructure and right throughout the political spectrum in Northern Ireland, that has been, I would term it a heavy level of engagement over the course of the last 12 months, particularly with the Department of Infrastructure to examine what the levels of funding is needed and what potential options are available for funding. So the relationship, I would say, is professional and close. And we try to examine every single option that we can for funding. You will be aware that there are some other initiatives in Northern Ireland that that the Department for Infrastructure have committed to funding, and certainly we intend to participate in some of those initiatives at a later stage.
Yeah, just following on, I know that they've Department stepped in to provide additional funding for council recently, but see in terms of the on-street residential charge point scheme, I mean, obviously there's no take-up on.
Cahill, hold on. Can you hear me, Cahill? I think the meeting's continuing on, but we're not part of it. Well, the meeting's here we're back in.
Opened at that stage, and I know that there is works ongoing with a consortium of the local councils here. I believe there's 10 councils involved to avail of some of that ORCS funding, and I think some of that has been matched, if I'm not mistaken, the last quarter has been matched by the Department of Infrastructure. So I think there has been some steps in the right direction. We certainly see very strong and solid green shoots in the space, but we recognise that we're catching up, I guess, in Northern Ireland. We have a lot to do. It does require some level of I guess, funding to make it happen, and we're committed to doing that. It is worth saying that we do operate Ecars at a loss in Northern Ireland. As I said, we spend between £500,000 and £600,000 trying to maintain the network, and that only gets us to about 70%. The interim investment programme that we made over the summer was made off our own bat. That was purely ESB Ecars money as well. So, any infrastructural funding or subsidies are very, very welcome, not just to us, but for other charge point operators.
John, as you know, there's to both of you, I mean, there's a number of pieces of legislation coming forward in terms of energy, in terms of climate action and climate bills and all. And I mean, this is a great opportunity. I mean, clearly, COVID has presented a big challenge for us, but it'll present opportunities as we rise out of it in terms of economic recovery. So, and I hope that there's an opportunity through all of that for more funding. But just my final point. See, in terms of the East Border Region Foster project, obviously there's funding there. I mean, is that something you're interested in or been tying in with, or any conversation about? Because, I mean, obviously it's close to my own area, so I was on the East Border Region. Don't have to declare an interest now, but I was at one point. But I think there's opportunities through it, and I'm just wondering what conversations you had in relation to it.
Yeah, we think that's an excellent project, actually, the FASTER project. I think it would target, and it will target, areas that a purely commercial charge point operator would not target. It's well funded through various funding streams. It covers the border region, both north and south of the border, but also, I'm sure you're aware of this, West Scotland as well. There's 20 or 30 chargers in West Scotland. We've actually presented to the FASTER project on quite a number of occasions over the last 12 months in particular around our capability and what we would bring to the FASTER project. We understand that in Q1/Q2 is the timeline for them to go to procurement for a partner to install all of these chargers. We believe we have our own partners and the infrastructure and the capability to bid strongly for that FASTER project, and I can confirm that it is our intention to do it whenever the public procurement process starts.
Well, John, maybe you get a chance to talk to Ecbon, which is the central region board of the Cardiff Group, and also the northwest. I mean, maybe there's opportunities there for you as well. I mean, I think it's a good project, and these board of the regions leading the way. But listen, thank you very much for your presentation,
Okay.
and thanks for your responses. And no doubt we'll see you again. Okay, thank you, Nick.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go to Roy Beggs now for a question.
Again, thanks for your update. You've reported less than 70% charger availability, and that's an unacceptable position, because it's clear from surveys that this committee has carried out, and indeed the Electrical Vehicle Association of Northern Ireland, that range anxiety is one of the impediments to change. Another issue that they've highlighted to us is that cars have been known to park in some of the charging points for over 48 hours. In terms of that, how do you manage availability of charging points to ensure that somebody's not just parking their car there?
Yeah, I would agree with your sentiment around the 48 hours. The first thing to say is yes, we do recognise that the perception of the network is an inhibitor to EV charging uptake, and that's why we're working so hard to try and improve it. We run our own surveys in addition to the ones you mentioned that the committee has run, and also EVA&I have run also. We're in the middle of running a survey, and we often conduct comparisons between the various jurisdictions. In relation to the etiquette, there has been a problem, and we have recognised that there's a problem in some areas around etiquette with regards to charging in Northern Ireland in particular. Instances such as cars parking on spots for hours, and in fact I have heard some of those stories around days as well. They're very frustrating for other EV drivers when they can't get on to the limited number of chargers there are available. We publish several newsletters to all of our members who are opted on to the marketing campaign, and in every single one of those newsletters we emphasise the very important topic of decorum or etiquette at our charging infrastructure. We do have that problem in other jurisdictions. We're working hard between commenting on it, on the websites, commenting on it in our twice yearly newsletter, and also anytime we have the opportunity to speak publicly around EV charging, we always mention around etiquette and what drivers need to do to improve the lot of other drivers. It is important to note, and we have seen this right across the island, that the majority of people in both the Northern Ireland and in the Republic of Ireland jurisdictions do charge at home. So about 75 to 85% of all charging is in fact done at home, with the balance 25% is typically done on our network, given that's the most extensive network on the island. So we encourage the home charging for reasons, economic reasons, but also for reasons around etiquette and to alleviate the concerns that some drivers have around range anxiety.
In terms of the financial model of the charges that are being put in, the UK Levelling Up Funds provided you with 3.2 million. Now, does that cover the entire capital costs? And is any of it directed towards ongoing maintenance? What's the business model?
Yeah, I can answer that. You're right. The Levelling Up Fund was 3.3 odd million that was provided by the Levelling Up Fund. That represents in a region of 90% of the total capital investment required. The Levelling Up Fund is only a capital fund, so none of the 3.3 million euros, or indeed our share of that, will go into operations or ongoing maintenance that will continue to be borne by ESB Ecars, and has nothing to do with the fund.
Okay. Can you clarify, are you giving away free electricity or are you charging for it at present?
No, it's free to use at the minute in Northern Ireland.
So you will make more money if the machines are down? Because you're taking a loss if you're providing free electricity, is that correct?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, in practical terms, if the chargers aren't working and no one's using them, they would consume less electricity. But in the greater scheme of things, given the volume and the number of EVs on the roads is increasing, so we're continuing to see an upward tick in the number of both transactions and in terms of the kilowatt hours being consumed.
So in terms of this model then, who pays for the maintenance?
We continue to pay for the maintenance.
So you...
ESB.
So if you provide a higher level of maintenance, you lose more money? Is that correct? What's going to stop the level of service reducing in 10 years' time again? Will we be down to 50 or 70% availability? What incentive is there to maintain?
There's an ongoing requirement for investment in the networks to upgrade on a capital basis all of the infrastructure that's there. The difficulty that we have now is that the old chargers are no longer, the companies that made them are no longer in business, so we can't source spare parts. We can't, whether they be electronic parts or leads, for example. Equally, for some of the companies which do exist, Siemens, ABB, like powerful companies, they have been quite categoric and said we cannot and we do not provide spare parts for these vehicles anymore, or for these chargers anymore. They're from an old line, they're not supported. So what we find is that where some chargers come out of service, we try and cannibalise working parts to keep the system operating at the highest possible levels. I foresee that when we go forward over the next decade, and as the numbers of EV drivers on the roads increase, as the commercial business case improves, the level of investment into the existing network will, I hope, persist and indeed increase. And I don't ever see a situation re-emerging whereby the existing assets on the network are so old that they cannot be maintained effectively any longer.
One of the areas of concerns that have been raised over a number of years is the charges that NIE networks charge for electrical grid connections. And in fact, that the grid connections, whether it's wind turbines or whether it's chargers, are much more expensive in Northern Ireland than in other parts of the United Kingdom. Can you explain why your grid connection costs are more expensive in Northern Ireland compared to elsewhere?
Yeah, well, in the first instance, I can confirm that the grid connection costs in Northern Ireland are substantially more expensive than any of the areas in GB that we operate in, that being London, Birmingham, or Coventry, and indeed in the Republic of Ireland. In all of those jurisdictions, the regulator operates what's termed generally in the business as a shallow model. And what that means is that the developer of EV charging would pay 50%, typically in the Republic of Ireland, it's 50% of the cost of the connection, and the remainder of the cost of the connection is recovered over the 40-year period, the life of the asset. Where that differs from Northern Ireland is the regulatory regime that currently exists is that the developer of EV charging infrastructure or anything, a supermarket, anything at all like that, they all have to pay 100% of the cost of that connection up front. So what that means in essence is that a much higher proportion of capex, of your capital allowance, goes on the actual grid connection than in other jurisdictions, and it does make investing, it makes investing harder to do because the return on your investment takes a longer period of time, and ergo it discourages commercial investment into charging infrastructure. Okay, which has probably been a contributor to why you see very, very low levels of commercial investment in the networks in Northern Ireland today.
Okay, so thanks very much. That's some things we need to follow up.
Okay, thank you, Roy. I know we are pressed because we have another briefing after this, but I'll go now to Liz Kimmins and then Andrew here to finish up.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you both for the presentation. It's been very interesting. It's just a couple of questions I have, just kind of leading on from what you've said. The project upgrade over 100 chargers will begin in 2022, and I was just wondering, have we got like an estimate time of completion on that? And even would it be possible to get a list of the works to try and get a better idea of when those charge points will be upgraded and where?
Yeah. Yes and yes and yes, I think is the answer to the questions. For the project that we did over the summer, it was a wave of 30 replacements, and we divided it into two waves, or two waves is what we call it, or two phases. And what each of those was 15, and we published where they were going to take place and the time period under which they were going to happen. So what we'll be doing for this programme is we will break it to 100 down into waves of maybe 50, but possibly 20. We'll publish where those locations are. We hope to do multiple locations simultaneously. And then post the event, we will then publish on our website and on our app where those changes have occurred, and photos, coordinates, etc. will be published. That is in, I should mention that originally the project fell under the responsibility of the Department for Levelling Up Housing and the Community. Because this has been deemed a majority transport project, the responsibility has been transferred to the Department of Transport, and the initial meeting, or the inception meeting as it's known, it was planned initially for before Christmas. It's now been pushed out following this transfer of responsibility, I guess, to late January. What I can tell you is once the chargers are here and have been delivered, we intend to start with the rollout of these, the fast replacement programme instantaneously. Our experience of the programme that we did over the summer and over the autumn would indicate that we can do 2, and on a very exceptional week 3 in that sort of period. So we are looking at approximately 1 year from start to finish. So I would expect to finish in around May or June of 2023, and all of those 100 chargers will be complete. Obviously then there's the upgrades and the build out of the hubs. Some of them require consent from landowners, and also the interaction with Northern Ireland Networks, the payment of the connection fee that we've just discussed, and the provision of electrical grid infrastructure. So we're not as clear on the timelines for them, but we have said in the round the project will complete in July or August 2023.
Okay, no, that's good. I suppose if we can be kept informed as well, just in the progress, that would be really, really good. Just I suppose in relation to that as well, I mean, obviously others have said they'll build it and they will come. So it would be interesting to know if ESB have made any assessment as to how many charge points we would need across the island, north and south, over the next couple of years to try and encourage greater uptake of EV usage.
Yeah, so the build out in the Republic is focused now on hubs. So these are I mentioned the hub build out, that this will be a first in Northern Ireland for all EV drivers. There's going to be 5 of them. We have started, I would say, embryonic conversations with some of the landowners as to where these will be sited. I know a number of councils are interested in participating in that. Those hubs represent sort of expansion of the network, and that's the remaining component of the investment programme in the Republic of Ireland. What I can tell you is that the investment by the Levelling Up Fund, and indeed the Climate Action Fund, intends to cater for all EV drivers and growth of EV numbers for the next sort of 3 to 4 and possibly into 5 years, depending on how the numbers go. At that point, and right throughout that, continuous investment will be required to further expand the network. What I would point out, I suppose one critical thing I did touch up it earlier, the public charging infrastructure is, I guess, one of 3 facets, if you like, of charging. So there's the home charging, which about 80% of people will do if they have access to driveways. And one of the other members of the committee did mention the on-street residential scheme that specifically targets people who don't have driveways or live in apartments. The second part then is destination or work charging. So hotels and gyms and workplaces, they also provide charging, and people do avail of that. And then the third leg is ourselves. So for it will require investment across each of those legs to meet the demand of EVs over the decade.
We've taken a similar approach in the Republic of Ireland, where the Climate Action Fund build-out programme has been designed for about 400,000 users. So again, we're building the network with a view to the usage in 3-4 years' time. And at that stage, we think the network will need increased investment. And likewise in Northern Ireland, the Levelling Up Fund build-out, we think, will give us 3 or 4 years of build it and they will come. And following that, then we'll need to have some increased investment for that expected increased usage of electric car drivers. But it is just a component of charging at home, charging at work, charging in hubs and at public infrastructure.
Okay, and that's good, because I mean, certainly the network and the issues with the network that we have at the minute is probably one of the biggest issues that we are getting from current EV users. So it is good to hear that there is work underway to try and build that out, albeit it's probably at a slower pace in the south. But I suppose that leads on to my next question and my final question, just in terms of what would ESB then like to see from our government here in terms of growing the charge point network? I know you'd mentioned there about funding and things like that, so I would be interested to see what we could be doing to try and encourage that and assist with that to build out the network here.
Yeah, so there is very sort of strong green shoots in terms of the in terms of the investment in the EV charging infrastructure. The faster project that was mentioned by Ms. Boyle, and certainly that ORC scheme that I think 10 of the local councils have identified spots, that will massively increase the number of fast chargers in the network. And I understand that there is a commitment by the Department of Infrastructure to commit to that. Certainly we would welcome any future initiatives in Northern Ireland in terms of funding provision. I can tell you that we will actively participate and look to go after that funding to expand the existing network for the benefit of EV drivers. That's not something that's unique to Northern Ireland. We do it in all of the jurisdictions, and we're not the only CPO who do it. Early stage funding or subsidy by governments, councils, local authorities, etc., is essential to establish a really robust charging infrastructure in the first place. It really takes away, and I don't think there's a single better tool at disarming the public in terms of their range anxiety concerns than regular, visible and reliable charge point infrastructure right throughout any jurisdiction that you operate in.
And maybe just to build on that, I think the support we got and the engagement we got as we went through the Levelling Up Fund application process was invaluable to us, securing that additional funding to allow us to do the upgrades. I think having that good open discussion and sessions like this, I think, are also invaluable, where we can have we can broaden our collaboration, understand your perspective. I think if we can share our perspective on this as well, I think we can kind of work together to try and build out the network. And I think as we go forward, the more of this we can do, and the more conversations we can have, the more collaboration we can have, I think it'll just be, it'll help accelerate the electrification of transport. The electrification of transport is one of the legs of the decarbonisation of society. Obviously we're driving towards using renewable electricity wherever we can, and just the third leg then is trying to electrify heat, which I think will come quite quickly as well. But I think if we can just continue having these conversations, we can have some open dialogues, collaborate together, then we can unlock the future.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you both. That's been very, very helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We go to Andrew Muir now for a question.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to both Johns for joining us today. It's appreciated. Just a few things. I'm very conscious of the level of investment that the Irish Government have provided, and that has resulted in the state of the network in the Republic of Ireland. So I think it's important to note that and put that clearly on the record for any doubt that may exist in relation to that. Obviously, the situation in the north, the lack of investment has had an impact, and I'm very encouraged by the announcement in terms of Levelling Up Fund, and hopefully that will help improve things. But we're also dealing with a market which has got its challenges in terms of its commercial attractiveness, in terms of the level of users there. Just a couple of queries. See, in terms of the current arrangements that you're operating in Northern Ireland, is that under contract with the Department for Infrastructure?
I'm not fully sure what you're asking there. No,
yeah. So you have your network in Northern Ireland, okay? Yeah. Is there any memorandum of understanding or any contract or relationship with the Department for Infrastructure at the present moment in time? Because there previously was when it was rolled out in back in sort of 2012 or whatever else when it was rolled out. So you don't have any contract or relationship with the Department for Infrastructure?
There's no legally or anything. No, there's nothing. And as far as I know, there's no one with any of the other CPOs with the Department of Infrastructure, and certainly in most of the other jurisdictions, unless it's directly funding a program, there would not be a sort of a legal relationship between that.
Yeah. So you're currently providing a charging infrastructure across Northern Ireland where no charges are levied to the users, and then there's issues in terms of the reliability of that infrastructure. I know no business in Northern Ireland that operates a model whereby it offers its services entirely for free. Okay, so I think it's important we note that. The issue for me is, and how are we going to move beyond that? Because one of the issues is that people are parking at the spaces for hours on end because there's no incentive to then move on because the service is entirely free. So do you have any plans this year to introduce charging on your network?
So no, not this year in 2021. However, in 2022, I'm sure you have, and all members of the committee have seen the general rise in the price of electricity, gas, petrol, diesel, all sorts of fuels. We buy electricity and ultimately we sell it on, so we're not immune to those rises. So we are actively looking at our commercial models in Northern Ireland in 2022, but not in 2021, with a view to examining our options around the commercialisation, introducing fees for charging and indeed overstay fees. So in many of the other jurisdictions we operate in, there's overstay fees. So it's to prevent that kind of behaviour that has built up in Northern Ireland. Look, the reality is we see it in all other jurisdictions, even when a financial penalty is there, but it does tend to knock it back quite significantly. So between the commercial viability, between the price of the raw material, electricity, the scale of the investment we make from a capital and operational perspective, and also to try and alleviate or improve the etiquette around some of the chargers, all of those are in the pot, if you like, and are under consideration around charging in 2022.
Yeah. So I think it's just crucial here, okay, because I'm not, I haven't held back in terms of criticising the state of the network and what it's been, particularly for the upgrades in terms of chargers, okay? And I do welcome the work that's been done in relation to addressing the ones that have got a particularly high failure rate. I think that's a positive thing. But we need to go beyond that, and we do need to have a look towards charging of the infrastructure and overstay. And other EV users will tell you that as well, that in order to have a mature EV charging network, we need to be able to have charging as part of that, which charging to the users. So I know you're saying you're looking at it. I think it needs to move a level of progress there, because otherwise, we're going to continue in these circular discussions around discontent around things. So I think it's really, really important. I had an understanding it would be the first quarter of next year that this would be brought in, and we need to get a greater clarity when we're going to do that, because there's other providers coming to the marketplace, commercial providers coming to the marketplace, and it's important that there's a competitive place there with yourselves and everyone else. And I think people would be happy to pay to use EV chargers if they worked. Okay, and that's a key thing, So these are the reason why I asked the questions at the beginning was sometimes there's a view that you're under contract providing this by government to the people of Northern Ireland with payment, and it's important to clarify that.
No, that doesn't exist. I will say just, I suppose, a couple of things. Just on the customer, you're 100% right on the customer. In fact, only, I'd say 2 months ago, we cancelled the EV drivers in the Republic of Ireland around the overstay fee in particular, whether they felt it was the charge was appropriate and whether they felt the durations were appropriate. And we got really, really strong feedback in that regard. I did mention, I can't remember to whom I said it, but very much earlier in the presentation, I did mention that we're currently running a survey for the Northern Ireland drivers, and there are quite a number of questions around overstay and charging habits in that. So we're hoping that's going to be one of the feeds into our deliberations around charging.
Yeah, and I think the etiquette thing's important, but sometimes, unfortunately, people don't observe that, and they leave the vehicle for hours on end. And like, if you, in terms of the petrol and diesel, the old fuels of the past, if you left your vehicle at that pump for hours on end, there's very clear feedback that you shouldn't do that. And unfortunately, sometimes in life, it's actually financial motivations, so the things which disincentivize people from doing things. But also, if you're charging for EV charging, and people are going to expect a level of service, and they're rightfully going to be able to, to do that. So one of the other things is that if you're going to move towards that model, you're obviously focused in terms of analytics, in terms of the areas which have had a high downtime. See the ones that you haven't upgraded. So I see the ones you upgraded, so I'm going out running and I'm like, that's been done, that's good, that's great. But see the ones that haven't been done, are you going to continue to do analytics? Because I wouldn't want to have a two-tier here where the ones that were constantly down have been fixed, but yet the ones that are probably less used are let to have low downtimes or high downtimes.
Yeah, no, that's one of the, I felt that one of the strengths of the submission actually, and I think one of the winning factors was the fact that all of the territory, all of the jurisdiction, all 6 counties were going to be treated exactly the same, and there wasn't going to be a focus on, let's say, for want of a better, like let's say Belfast or Derry or the high population centres where we would, where we see lots of usage and in theory you would derive more revenue. We were very, very clear to state at multiple occasions. I remember I even felt that we overdid it at the time, that we were very much focused on ensuring that all of the assets right around the entire area were going to be upgraded. I did say we have the capability to do 2 and possibly 3 of those upgrades a week. So you will see once we put a shovel in the ground here when the charges arrive, you will see very rapid progress, I should say, right throughout the year, and that progress will be apparent to users wherever they live or charge.
Okay, I'm going to have to move on, Andrew. Have you a final question or?
Yeah, it's just really in terms of the rollout of the charging infrastructure as a result of the Levelling Up Fund. Will you be able to come back to us when in due course let us know where that will be, because that'll be very keenly sought after information whereabouts the upgrades and the improvements are going to come about, because I think people are really positive to see what's been announced, but want to see whereabouts it's going to go.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd be delighted to do that. Maybe in a couple of months when we have the actual plan, we have more certainty around when the chargers have arrived. I did say we had started the very initial commercial discussions with some landowners around upgrades and hub sites. I would be very hopeful in a couple of months we'll have a number of them signed. We'll be in a position to be able to share that publicly, and indeed a timeline for the first wave or 2 of the replacements.
Okay. Thank you. And by the way, over the last number of months, there's been significant work by yourselves to address concerns, and I think it's important to say thank you for that. I think it's important, and I do appreciate that.
No, we acknowledge that. You're definitely familiar name to us, so thanks very much, and appreciate it.
Okay, we have a brief supplementary here from Roy Beggs, and then I have to bring this to a close.
Could you just clarify, are there any rules or regulations that are stopping you charging at the moment which would enable you to have a positive business model which will incentivise you to have chargers available for the public by providing the necessary maintenance?
No, I don't believe we can come back and just clarify that point. I don't believe there is any regulatory reason why we can't introduce charging. I think, to be fair, the current availability and reliability of the network is not where we would like it to be, and we've said we're kind of uncomfortable with that at this stage. We have a program that will upgrade the system to a point where it will be highly reliable. It'll be building confidence with both current users and future e-car drivers, so that they're happy to invest in moving to electric cars. And at that stage, I think it's probably appropriate to look to bring in a charging model.
That's what
But to be fair,
Okay, I have to end it there. That was a nice note to end on. Sure, you can come back with some of those points. Look, can I thank John and John for coming to the committee this morning. Certainly very interesting, and I know there's a number of follow-up points there, but we do appreciate you coming before the committee today, and we wish you both a very happy and Merry Christmas. Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, we're now moving on to a briefing by Sustrans on tackling climate change through active travel. I'll just wait because I know we have, Karen's here in person, so we were just told to be Okay, very welcome.
Well,
We'll give you a wee moment there to
thank you.
Okay, members, as you know, we have a briefing now, as I've said, from Sustrans on tackling climate change through active travel. It'll be at 674, the briefing paper, in terms of the committee notes. We are running tighter for time. We do have to be out of this building by between 12 and quarter past, so apologies, that did run over. So I would just ask, in relation to the meeting, if Sustran can try to keep the presentation as concise as possible. Bearing in mind, members will have most of the briefing paper. And can I ask members, please, to keep their questions short? And I promise I'll try to adhere to that as well. And we will try our best to get through this. This is our last presentation of the day. Okay, so without further ado, could I welcome Ms. Caroline Bloomfield, the Director of Sustrans, and Ms. Anne Madden, Policy and Media Advisor for Sustrans. You're both very welcome. The last time we were with you, we were happily cycling our e-bikes along the front of Stormont. An interesting experience. I think I beat Roy Beggs hands down in that race. But you're both very welcome to committee this morning, and I'll hand over to you for your presentation.
Thanks very much, and thanks very much for your welcome. I'm delighted to be here this morning to speak to you about how we can tackle climate change through the way that we travel. And one of the biggest factors causing climate change is our driving habits. And tackling greenhouse gas emissions, as you know, was a key theme of COP26, and you just referred to the fact that last time we were up here was on Transport Day of COP26, and you were trying out the e-bikes. So at Sustrans, we want to make it easier for people to walk or cycle, and we do this because of the multiple benefits. You know, the benefits are wide-ranging, from our physical health and our mental well-being through to reducing congestion and air pollution, and importantly reducing greenhouse gases and the impact that has on climate change. We want to see our travel choices resulting in healthier places and happier lives for everyone. So you may know in Sustrans we've got two key priorities. So the first is paths for everyone, so like a network of greenways and urban paths that a sensible 12-year-old could use on their own. And we created the National Cycle Network that you're probably familiar with, which runs across the whole of the UK, and we're custodians of that, and we'd really like to see that extended and joined up as part of the Greenway strategy for Northern Ireland. And we want to see livable cities and towns for everyone, you know, where more people are supported and enabled to walk and cycle for everyday journeys. And in Northern Ireland, most of our work in Sustrans is focused on behaviour change, and we've got 3 major programmes in schools, workplaces and communities, and they're funded by DFI and Public Health Agency. So what is the problem that we're facing? I think over the years we have planned and built places for the car rather than for people. And as a result, transport is the second biggest cause of greenhouse gas emissions here in Northern Ireland at 20%. And it's the only sector that's seen an increase in recent years. And if the UK is to meet its targets and its legal obligations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we really need to rapidly decarbonise our transport. Modelling suggests that we need to reduce car use by 20 to 60% between now and 2030 if we're to meet those targets. So that's going to need rapid and radical change to the way that we view transport here. So I just want to show you, and I'm sorry, I can't see the slides, so I hope that you're flicking through them, but I want to show you like a real example of the choices we face. Just down the road from Stormont, we've effectively got a tale of two cities. So on one side, you've got the Conswater retail park with not one but 4 drive-throughs, with cars sitting there all day, engines emitting, gases, causing congestion and pollution. And on the other side, just on the other side of the road, you've got C.S. Lewis Square, that I think you'll all know, which is vibrant, full of people walking, cycling, meeting, having a chat. So we have a choice. Do we want to continue making places for cars to use, or do we want to make places for people to use, and especially for walking and cycling? And one of the reasons for the vibrancy of C.S. Lewis Square is the Sustrans Active Travel Hub, where we run a number of programmes there. And it's crucial because it's a key intersection of 2 greenways. So we've got infrastructure and we've got behaviour change, and it's those 2 being married together that has the biggest impact. Because we know behaviour change is not easy or straightforward. It takes time, which is why we really need to be addressing this now. One solution is that we can all drive less. Many of us, I think, have just become so accustomed to driving everywhere, every day, and it is a habit that we need to tackle. Or we could all start by not using the car one day a week, taking the bus or the train or walking or cycling. In Belfast, almost half of the journeys we make are less than 2 miles long, according to the annual travel survey, and that's less than 15 minutes by bike. Now, we know not every journey can be walked or cycled, but many can with a little bit of support. So we know that tackling climate change and creating more livable places could be a win-win. It shouldn't necessarily be seen in a negative, really arduous way. So you might be thinking, well, sure, we can all change to electric vehicles, and I realise that you've just been having a presentation on that very subject this morning. But I'd also like to ask you to consider e-bikes, and you did yourselves try them out. It's a far cheaper solution, and also it open up, cycling to so many more people, both in terms of distance they can travel, but maybe the age or ability of the cyclist as well. And unlike electric cars, they also tackle congestion and the sedentary lifestyles that we have. But we know that there are many barriers to active travel. We carry out a survey every 2 years, and you won't be surprised to hear that the main barrier that is highlighted is safety. And and the barriers aren't experienced equally either. I mean, 19% of men in Belfast say they cycle once a week or more. Only 5% of women do. And the main reason that they cite is safety. So I think having better infrastructure could make such a difference. So a key factor in all of this, we need to make sustainable transport much more attractive than driving. So that means making significant improvements for people who want to travel actively, and perhaps making it a little bit more difficult to drive. So I want to highlight 6 key asks we have of you, which we believe would address barriers to active travel and result in real modal shift. So getting more people out of their cars, reducing the number of miles driven. So the first one is we would like to see the underinvestment, the historic underinvestment addressed by dedicating at least 10% of the transport budget to walking and cycling. At the moment, it's just 2% of the transport budget here in Northern Ireland is spent on active travel, and that compares to 10% in Scotland and 20% in the Republic of Ireland. So we're being left behind, and really a long way behind. We're spending about £7 per head of population this year in Northern Ireland on active travel. Now, that's improved on about £2, £1 to £2 historically, but that compares to £60 per head in Scotland, £66 per head in the Republic of Ireland, and in England and Wales they're also spending considerably more than we do here. And long-term funding is essential. For too long, active travel's had the crumbs from the table, but without any real long-term investment. And contrary to what you might think, people want change, voters want change. I think on your slide you should see there's a survey that we carried out from Bike Life, which is an independent survey, and it found that there was far higher support for public transport and active travel than for building roads. And the same survey found 67% of residents supported building more on-road cycle tracks, even if that meant taking space away from cars. So this is a vote winner as well, and I think it more so than ever, given the really high profile and concern there is about climate change. So our second ask is making walking and cycling a realistic and safe alternative to the car by developing a network of urban and rural greenways across Northern Ireland. The department published its exercise Explore Enjoy strategic framework for greenways 5 years ago, and since then there's been very little progress. So although some capital funding has been offered to councils, no revenue funding has been available to enable it to happen. So DFI have now indicated that they wish to commission an organisation to support that coordination, and that's very welcome news. But there's no guarantee of any funding past March of next year, which again just shows that it's very hard to have a really strategic approach when it's only ever short-term funding. Our third ask is around cycling networks, and especially to implement the Belfast cycling network. This took 5 years to develop and consult on. It was published in June, but we're still waiting for the implementation plan. By contrast, the glider scheme, which we fully support, was published and launched with a project team, a budget and a time frame for delivery, and we would like to see the same urgency and the same approach to active travel. I think it reflects a lack of urgency on the part of the department really to push forward with active travel, and we know the Minister is very committed in this area, and there are some very good people in the department pushing it forward, but I think structurally the department is just not set up really to push forward on active travel, and we really need to see change. So our fourth ask is around children. We really think every child in Northern Ireland should be able to walk or cycle to school. And every survey we've done shows that 80% of children want to do this, but we have a vicious cycle of traffic around schools, making it unsafe, parents feeling nervous, and you just end up with more air pollution, more children being driven to school. I mean, in Northern Ireland, 50% of primary school children live under 1 mile from school, and 68% of children are driven. That is just incredible, and that is something that could really easily be addressed. And we do have a really good programme here, a real success story that's funded by DFI and Public Health Agency in the Active School Travel programme. It is getting results, so whilst the overall statistics are not great in Northern Ireland, at participating schools last year, you can see that children walking or cycling went up from 31% to 43%, and there was a corresponding drop in driving from 61% to 50%, so it does work. So we're calling on the department to expand the programme and to develop a safe routes to school programme alongside it for that important infrastructure element. We'd love to see school streets programme as well. They're happening across the UK but not in Northern Ireland. And we'd love to see proper on-road cycle training for all P6 pupils and secure cycle and scooter parking at schools. The programme's been going for 8 years. It's been really successful. But now we face the potential of it being cut, of it not continuing. It's due to finish in the summer. There's no guarantee or no clarity on whether funding will be available next year. DFI give 200,000 a year, which is matched by PHA. And this amount hasn't increased in 8 years either, I should say. And I would say it's peanuts in the context of the departmental budget. Yet the one programme that's being delivered to tackle the school run and is really having results faces being axed, and I think that's pretty poor. So moving on to I'm getting near the end. Our fifth ask is about how do we make our areas more livable and sustainable places for everybody. We'd like to see a focus on 20-minute neighbourhoods, central to planning, so that, that you should be able to get what you need within a 20-minute walk rather than having to drive everywhere for what you need. We'd love to see an active travel act that would It would make planners have to consider active travel as part of any development. It would also make it a legislative requirement within the department, because at the moment we keep being told it's not one, money can be scooped from active travel and given to other things that are a legislative requirement for the department. We would also like to see 20-mile-an-hour limits as default in built-up areas. I think they've been very successful around schools. We'd like to see more of that. And we would like to see pavement and cycle lane parking being tackled. And there is an advert campaign around that at the moment, which is good. Lastly, we would really like to see a network of active travel hubs across Northern Ireland, like the one that we have in C.S. Lewis Square. And one particular one that I think would be fabulous in the Northwest Multimodal Hub, which has just recently been opened. It has an active travel centre built in it, but unfortunately no funding to actually animate it or run it as an active travel centre, which I think is a real shame. It's supposed to be a multimodal hub. At the moment it's not very multimodal, but there's a real opportunity there to drive change in the Northwest. But I think it's just another example of active travel not being given the priority that it needs in order to actually see genuine change, getting people out of their cars and walking or cycling and into public transport. So that brings me to the end. I've sort of rattled through a lot of things there fairly rapidly. I hope I've outlined how I believe that we can enable more people to walk and cycle with the right infrastructure and behaviour change support. I think we see from other countries where that is in place, you really do get more people walking and cycling. And if we do that, we will cut emissions hugely and get us on the right path. Rather, I think in Northern Ireland, we focus so much on cars. We'd just like to see the balance redressed. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Caroline. We as a committee very much do appreciate a detailed presentation and not only the broad outlines but also asks, and it is important for us to consider them. I have a number of questions, so I'm going to try to get through this. I want other members to get a chance to get in as well. Firstly, on ask 2, which is greenways. Given current budgetary constraints and other key priorities, not least health and education, given where we are at present, what realistic prospect is there of any significant development of greenways across Northern Ireland in the foreseeable future? Have you given consideration to this?
Yeah, I mean, our understanding is that capital funding seems to be less of an issue, and obviously the vast majority of money in greenway development is in capital. So I think that should be possible. I think where the problem has been is the revenue funding that allows a lot of that happen, the coordination, the feasibility studies, and so on. But I would also say, you mentioned health, and I absolutely understand why a lot of the focus is on health. If we get more people walking and cycling, that improves our health outcomes. 1 in 6 deaths in the UK is attributable to lack of physical activity. So actually, if we can get more people walking or cycling, that will improve our health outcomes for the population in Northern Ireland. So yes, we absolutely understand that there is limited funding available, but we are also saying we're not necessarily looking for new funding. It's a reprioritisation within the transport budget to take away the focus from building roads and actually put it into greenways. You get a lot more miles of greenway than you do of road for the same amount of money, and a lot of more benefits.
Okay, so you have sort of answered what was coming on to there about where you think that funding would come from to address such issues. Ask 3 is cycle networks. So you refer to cycle networks in our 2 largest cities and then state and other urban areas. Cities seem to be where Sustrans focus has its focus, and understandably for a lot of reasons. But can you provide details of specific actions Sustrans have taken in relation to the development of cycle networks in other smaller, more urban and rural areas across Northern Ireland?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of the focus has been on bigger urban areas because you get more bang for your buck, I guess, and there's more. There do tend to be more people cycling in urban areas. But we have been working with some local authorities. So most recently in Newry, Mourne and Down, we completed an active travel master plan for them, which highlighted greenways and routes through urban settings that they could choose to develop. But obviously our active school travel programme is a regional programme right across Northern Ireland. We work in 200 schools, and that's about creating a culture of active travel in each of those sort of mini settings. But yeah, I guess a lot of our focus has been on Belfast and the Northwest. but we would like to work in other urban town settings as well. We've been exploring with Ards and North Down about having an active travel hub in Newton Ards and in Bangor. So we're awaiting to hear back from them as well, because I think there is an appetite. I mean, I think annually there is an appetite across Northern Ireland to see more active travel.
Yeah, I tend to think, and I think that there's a balance that has to be struck in a lot of this, given Northern Ireland's sort of demographic and particularly the rural population to the west of the province. So, could I ask, to what extent would Sustrans concede that, given the rural nature of much of Northern Ireland, that there will always be a need for people to travel by car, and given the large number of seemingly insurmountable barriers, given distances, etc., and connectivity, that active travel and public transport options cannot work in an environment under many circumstances. So there's particular areas where public transport's a difficulty, never mind whether it's cycle infrastructure or whether it's greenways. Would you concede that as an issue?
Oh, no, absolutely. And we are not saying that every journey has to be walked or cycled, because we know that that's not realistic. And there are areas and there are places where it's going to be much more challenging. But what we are saying is, where it is possible, let's make it possible for the people who want to do it. In Belfast, there's 30% of the respondents to our survey said they would love to walk or cycle more, but they're scared and they need support. Let's focus on the areas where we absolutely can, not ignoring the other areas. But I suppose what I don't want is people to think that we're zealots who say every journey has to be walked or cycled. We know that that's not possible, but there are lots more that could be, and people would like to, but need the safe infrastructure to do it.
Okay, thank you. I do have other questions, but I think members may touch on them regarding the children aspect in terms of the school safety. But we'll go to members, and if it's not touched on, I'll come back on it. So we'll go to Cathal Boylan, Liz Kimmins, and then Andrew Muir. And I would ask members please to remember that we do have to be out of here by 8:15 at the latest.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, we can indeed, Cathal.
So the screen's just freezing a bit. Karen, thanks very much for the presentation. I see there you're calling for 10% of the budget to go towards active travel. Could you expand a wee bit on how you would like to see that allocated? I mean, like, for example, cycle lanes or greenways, behavioural incentives, or active travel school programme. How would you like to see that budget spent if you got 10%?
Well, I think the infrastructure is critical, and I know infrastructure tends to be expensive, so I suspect that might eat up a fair amount of it. But I do think that it's important also to allocate money towards the revenue side. I think we hear constantly within the department that it's the revenue is where the issues are and where it's challenging. I think you absolutely do need to have those people working in schools, working with communities and working with workplaces to enable and support people to make the change. But I do think the infrastructure probably would take the lion's share of the funding, just because by its nature it is more expensive. But I think other countries have shown that it is possible to do this reallocation. Scotland, I think, has just doubled its allocation or its proportion of funding going into active travel without new money. I think it is about a reprioritisation of the department's budget is the critical thing here.
Thank you. It's just some of the signal for chairs picking up. Just going off that, and Caroline, as you know, I'm very supportive of the Monaghan Middletown Greenway, and I hope that goes ahead, because I mean that'll create a lot of opportunities, great opportunities for that area. So it's important that project is completed. Just the other issue, obviously there's a great opportunity over the COVID period, to cultivate a strong cycle and walking culture and to develop active travel in that respect. But we've seen now that traffic now has returned to pre-COVID levels. Do you think we've missed a trick in moving the modal shift, or do you think there wasn't enough ambition, or not enough pop-up cycles, or was there not enough ambition within the department? Would you like to respond in relation to what you've seen over that period?
Yeah, I mean, I think we probably were all struck at the start of the first lockdown, how many people were walking and cycling, and there was a real appetite there, and it shows that where people feel safe, they will walk or cycle. at the start, we did see some, a few pop-up cycle lanes went up really rapidly, and that was excellent. We really welcomed that. But I think progress really stalled after that, and where in England, Scotland and Wales and the Republic, they zoomed ahead with lots of additional walking and cycling infrastructure, we sort of stopped. And I think that we have missed an opportunity. It's not to say we can't go back and do more now, and I think we absolutely would love to see more. But I suppose what it highlighted for me at the beginning, it is possible to move quickly. The pop-ups went up really fast. They were successful, and they're going to stay now. We saw the review of that had come out, and that's really good. But what really struck me was that when it is safe, people will walk and cycle. Families were out on bicycles on roads that you would never see before. So I think we need to focus on people will do it if they feel safe. So let's put the infrastructure in to enable that to happen.
Could I also add just to that, Caroline and Cathal? What we saw, particularly in Belfast, we've got 3 pop-up cycle lanes that were put in to help key workers to travel to our local hospitals, which was very commendable. They were put in 3 weeks. It took 3 years to put in the cycle lane in Middlepath Street. So it showed during COVID what was actually possible. And we know that cycle infrastructure is really cheap, and the return on investment is really high, because contrary to what some businesses think, cyclists are customers too. Most businesses underestimate by 100%, according to research we've seen independently, how much cycling customers spend in shops. But the problem throughout COVID was these pop-ups weren't really connected, and what we are hoping to see is a delivery plan. The Belfast Cycling Network needs a delivery plan. It needs a funding pot and a team to deliver the plan, because so much of our cycling infrastructure are little oases of a little bit of protected cycling. We need to see them joined up, because you and me, I drive a car too sometimes. I don't drive a car on a little stretch of road for it just to end. We need a cycling infrastructure that is connected, joined up, and takes people where they want to go, because cyclists aren't aliens, they are people too, and they want to travel to schools, to shops, to visit people. But we need the connected, safe infrastructure for them to do that. So during COVID, yes, we had an opportunity. Unfortunately, we only saw 1 pop-up cycle lane in the whole of Derry, Londonderry. We had an attempt at a cycle lane in Newry that was scuppered because people didn't want to give up car parking spaces. So we really need to do an awful lot more. The policy in the department is to have cycling infrastructure, and we need to see that through, and we need to see the appropriate funding to connect these lanes up.
Okay. Cathal, you happy enough?
So, just one final question. Sorry, it's just the signal's breaking up on me here. Just in your view in relation to the removal of a cycle lane in Belfast from TransLink, I mean, surely if we're moving forward, want to be creating more cycle lanes?
I think that's been resolved, that there's going to be a bus lane and a cycle lane.
Yeah.
So I think the cycle lane is being reduced in size.
That issue's been resolved, has it?
Apparently so, yes. The cycle lane is being reduced slightly in size to enable a bus lane to go to 2 traffic lanes to go in, and I think one of them will be a bus lane, but the department has to go through its processes first. So
that message need to get out clearly then, as opposed to. No, but listen, thank you very much for your presentation. But I think arising from COVID and the aftermath of COVID, I think we've good opportunities here. But listen, thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. 15 minutes, and I want to get everybody in. So, Liz Kimmins, please, for question.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you both as well for the presentation. And the Chair sort of covered the question I was going to ask, just around the smaller, kind of more urban areas, and you mentioned Newry, Morning Down, which is part of my own area, because it is something that comes up all the time. I just suppose in the comment there, just in relation to the plan around pop-up cycle lanes for Newry that didn't go ahead, just to clarify that, because I was involved at the time, the issue wasn't that people didn't want to give up parking space. The issue was there was a lack of consultation with local businesses and that. So that was why there was an issue with that, because it is important that there's consultation on some of the stuff. It was basically that people were told a couple of days before and this was happening. So I think it is important to note that, because there is a major call for proper cycle lanes in Newry, but I think it has to be done in conjunction with the community here and things like that. But just in relation to that, I suppose particularly thinking of my own area, obviously there's been announcements around the shared island initiatives on the greenways, and just like to get a wee bit of a comment, I suppose, from yourselves on that and how you see that working out.
And I don't know, Anne, if you've got more information than I do on
I saw yesterday that the finance minister's approved the park for Newry. Is that what? Are you talking about the Greenway, Carlingford Greenway? Is that what you're referring to?
No, well, I mean, it was just the Taoiseach has obviously made announcements in relation to funding from the Shared Island unit. Okay. So it was just to see if maybe you weren't aware of the detail on that. It was just to see how you felt that would benefit as well.
We would like to see, I mean, it's very welcome to have a greenway network throughout the whole of Ireland, and we've seen some really successful greenways, the Waterford Greenway and the Great Western Greenway, that are huge booms for the local economies in those areas. So we would love to see more of that for Northern Ireland. So it obviously ticks boxes in terms of health and physical activity, but as well as that it regenerates areas. So the Carlingford Greenway linking up to the Newry Canal towpath, which is part of the National Cycle Network in Northern Ireland, we would really love to see. I think there is a plan for an urban greenway connecting the Newry towpath to the Carlingford Greenway. And then you can see what I was referring to earlier, how all of this connects up so that people have the option of leaving their cars behind and can use both greenways and urban cycling networks to get about without having to, jump in their cars. So a full island greenway network would be wonderful, and I think it is within our gift to deliver that if we reallocate funding away from all the roads projects which don't deliver as much benefits for either the economy or the population's health and the environment. As you know, that's what we came here to talk about, was the fact that we are in a climate emergency. We saw the scenes this week, the tornadoes in Kentucky. We need to get real about the reality that it is. We are going to be suffering from continual flooding and other climate-related issues. So having more options for people to leave their cars behind and to go carbon-free is a good thing. The bicycle was invented last century or the 1800s. We have no need for a lot of this new technology when we have a mode of transport that can get us about without ruining the environment. So yes, absolutely, Liz, we'd love to see a full greenway network for Northern Ireland connecting to the south.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's great, and I think there's actually potential for the Newry one to link as far as Portadown, because the towpath goes as far as there. But just another quick one. The presentation has called for an Active Travel Act, and we've been calling for that ourselves, and I have raised it with the Minister. Just especially with COP26, so to kind of see was there any discussion with her Welsh counterparts, because I know they have active travel legislation. So I suppose what do you see as the composition of an Active Travel Act, and can we improve and learn from the experiences of the Active Travel Act in Wales that I'm referring to?
Yeah, I think we'd certainly want to learn from what has worked well there, and we'd love to see one here. I think it was clear, even though we were asking for one quite early on, that we were told there just wasn't going to be time within this legislative period to get one through. But I think we could learn a lot from what's happened in Wales and make sure that we had a really strong act. Certainly what I think we're hearing is the fact that planners have to consider active travel at the outset is having an impact rather than trying to retrofit active travel into schemes afterwards. And Anne, you might have more detail on that.
Yes, I mean we've discussed an Active Travel Act. I know Roy Begg sitting there. We've discussed this at the All Party Cycling Group a number of times, and as Caroline said, unless we have the statutory duties in place, the Department for Infrastructure will not prioritise active travel infrastructure. So I think an Active Travel Act is essential if we are to get past that particular barrier, because time and again we see active travel schemes. Caroline mentioned the glider scheme. It has a delivery plan, it has a funding pot, it has a team to deliver. We don't have that for the Belfast Cycling Network, let alone for any other town in Northern Ireland. So we need an Active Travel Act to deliver on these schemes, and I think it should be a priority of the next Assembly, that it should be a piece of legislation that is taken forward. Sustrans has colleagues in the Welsh or in Wales that can help advise on that. It involves quite a bit of work in terms of mapping out the whole of the country, but it's not something that's beyond our ability to deliver on.
Okay.
That's great. And I think maybe one of the things that could be looking at, in the same way planning now requires housing developments to have green spaces.
Yeah.
Any new road schemes or redevelopment of current road schemes should potentially include cycling and walking provision. So,
yes.
Chair, I had another question, but I let it sit because I know others are waiting. Thank you, and thank you both for your responses.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Andrew Muir, please, and we have Roy Begg, so we have to try to get these two questions in.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll be brief. Just to reiterate the point about the improved cycling infrastructure beyond major cities, I think it's important. A number of times I've been out in Craigavon and seen the cycling infrastructure that's there, and I wish that would be replicated in other towns. Just as my questions really in the active school travel programme, and in your presentation you called for that to be expanded. I would entirely agree with that because the results are showing great success. But the funding you get at the moment only covers for a fifth of Northern Ireland schools. Has the department and also the PHA given any indications about plans to expand this programme? Because I think it would be really good to see this at all schools actually across Northern Ireland.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I suppose the short answer is no. We have no clarity at the moment, but what we would love to have this. I mean, it has been a really successful programme year on year throughout the 8 years the programme has been running. We've seen significant increases in walking and cycling at all of the schools that have been participating. But the latest 5-year iteration of the programme comes to a close this summer, and we've been pushing the departments for an answer as to whether it will be continued. So I think we're being told they don't know about funding available next year, which is one thing. There's also, I guess, the whole issue of procurement and having to go through that, which means it's actually quite critical to have a decision quite soon, given we know that procurement tends to take at least 6 months. So we're very keen that the programme can continue. I think it's the one programme that is really tackling the school run and congestion. We know Public Health Agency is very supportive of keeping the programme running as well. They've certainly seen the benefits of getting, because it also is helping children meet the Chief Medical Officer guidelines on recommended physical activity. That's increased hugely. So we would really like to have some clarity from the department as to their intentions for the next school year, and certainly schools are asking for it. We would love to see an expanded programme because we've only been allowed to go to each school once. So you've been through an entire life cycle of children have been through it. Teachers have moved on, principals have changed. We would really like an opportunity to revisit some of the schools again, and we would love to see all children getting on-road cycle skills training. That's not possible at the moment either.
Yeah, I entirely agree. Could I maybe suggest, Chair, that we write to the department asking for an update in relation to this?
Yep. I think that's a good suggestion. We'll come to that point at the end. Happy enough, Andrew? We can move on to Roy for final?
Okay, keep going.
Okay, Roy.
Thank you.
There seems to be a big difference between aspirational comments and what actually is being delivered, I dare say, by politicians and governments. You've indicated there's only about 2% funding in Northern Ireland for active travel compared to 10 and 20% elsewhere. So my question around that is until there is active involvement in area plans and actually delivery in terms of budgets, how achievable is such things as zero carbon and the health benefits from active walking and cycling?
I think we do really need a real culture shift, within the department at lots of levels. I think we are still very focused on building roads for cars, for people to move vehicles in and around our towns, and I think we need a total shift in our thinking about how do we move people in and through our town. So that means more focus on public transport as well as walking and cycling. I think if we keep on doing the same things that we have been doing, we're not ever going to reach our targets. And I think what you said at the beginning about the aspiration and the reality, I mean, that's spot on. We've got a lot of great policy documents. We've a lot of really good aspirational statements about how we want more people to walk and cycle. We want to prioritise walking and cycling. All the right things are being said, but in terms of actual delivery, we're not seeing that's not being matched in actual delivery, because it keeps coming down to, well, we have to do this, and well, we've got this roads project has to happen, and or now we're hearing, well, actually the money's needed for the sewage system, the money's needed for something else entirely. So I think we do need to match the rhetoric with delivery on the ground, or we're not going to get anywhere near the targets that have been set.
Has the active travel unit had any input into the various local councils' area plans, which are at an advanced stage?
That I don't know.
I would assume they would have, but the time and again we hear that the active travel unit in the department is understaffed. 7 years ago when I started at Sustrans, there was a good team of people, and there doesn't seem to be the staff there. And if you look at the Republic of Ireland, they have climate change officers, they have cycling officers within different departments and councils. We don't seem to have the same staffing in the north to deliver what we expect.
And we're not being critical of the active travel unit, because actually they are great. They're we're like that on record. They're very good to work with and very committed individuals, but there just aren't enough of them. They're really under-resourced within the department in order to meet all of the obligations that they have. And I think people have left and haven't been replaced. So I think if the department is serious about actually delivering on active travel, they need to resource that unit as well.
You seem to be saying that other regions where there's a commitment for a net zero by 2050 are much more advanced in what they're actually doing, when locally many have an aspirations for 2045, but we're not doing anything. Would that be a fair summation?
I think that's fair.
Thank you.
Nice way to close, Roy. Look, can I thank both Caroline and Anne very much for coming up this morning. Apologies, it was a wee bit more rushed towards the end, but there was quite a lot of questions for both presentations, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for coming up this morning, and can I take this opportunity to wish you both and your families a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and talk to you.
Thanks very much.
And I hope to see you all on e-bikes sometime soon.
We're glad we've made your briefing paper. Thank you very much. Okay, members, I'll just do a couple of tidying up points here, just to make sure that we're out in time for the next meeting that's being held. So agenda item number 13, which is the forward work programme. Can I draw members' attention to the draft work programme, proposed draft work programme at 693, draft work programme. Members content enough to note? Agreed. Okay, and agenda item number 14, which is any other business. Have members anything else they wish to raise? I'll briefly come to why no one's notified me.
Just to tidy up what we learned there earlier on, there is no maintenance model, there is no business model, and I think it's very important that we follow that up with departmental officials. Yeah.
I think following the ASB presentation, if members were content, we will get the relevant departmental officials in to talk about the department's aspect of this, because I think it's important that we tie the two up. Because we did hear, it was a very good presentation, it revealed a lot, and I think it would be only right that we follow that up. So members content with that action point that's been raised. George Robinson, I'm conscious that you haven't had a chance. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, carry on.
Okay.
Carry on, Chair.
Thank you.
You're
Members.
You're pushed for time.
Okay, listen, that just leaves it to agenda item number 15, which is date, time and location of next meeting. Can I wish members a very Merry Christmas, and can we also all collectively thank our staff from the committee who have put in a stellar of a shift to get us to this point, and some fantastic outward visits that we know takes a lot of time to organise, and we're very grateful for everything that you've all done to keep the committee working efficiently and smoothly. So the next meeting will take place at 10 a.m. Wednesday the 19th of January 2022 in the Senate Chamber Parliament buildings. Could I advise members in the room of the need to maintain social distancing while leaving, and can I wish you all a very Merry Christmas. Thank you. The meeting is now adjourned.